Hello everyone, Lawrence here from Unicorn Reviews, and I absolutely love mechanical keyboards. However, spending 2 greasy, fiddly, painful minutes lubing a single switch just sounds like an absolute nightmare to me. It took me over 5 hours just to lube up this small size keyboard. So when I saw that Akko is selling factory hand-lubed switches, I got really interested, but the main question is, are they as good as the one you lube yourself? So in today's video, what I'm going to do is test a stock switch versus a factory lubed switch versus one that I lubed up myself. For this video, I would really appreciate it if you guys were to wear some really nice headphones or just wait till you get home to get a decent set of speakers. I'm going to do a very detailed sound test on each variation of the switch, and I also bought one of these little lens tube focus macro thingies so we can get the camera right in there to check what the quality of the lubing process is like. Akko sells factory hand-lubed versions of the jelly black, the wine red, and the ones you see right here, which is the jelly white, lavender purple, and the matcha green. These two are linear. This is very light linear, slightly heavier linear, and then this is a normal weight sort of tactile. The pricing on this is really impressive. Depending on which one you get, it's 4 to 6 euros extra to get them hand lubed from the factory, and that is for a 45 pack, meaning you pay about 10 cents to get a lubed switch versus an unlubed switch. Akko says these are hand lubed with Krytox 105 or 205 grade 0, but looking into things a little bit more closely, we actually find on their website that all their switches have a dry film lubrication going on, and the hand-lubed switches just have their bottom housings hand-lubed. Now, to get an idea of whether or not spending 10 euros extra per keyboard on Akko factory lubed switches is actually worth it, I timed myself lubing this jelly white. And it took me 1 minute and 55 seconds to lube a single switch. Now 40 of those seconds were just trying to get this one open. It's a cherry style housing, but it wouldn't open as easily as a standard cherry switch with my keycap openers. Now Akko can sell these switches really cheap because, first of all, cheap labor, but also because they probably don't have to open up every single one of them. However, I don't think they can actually hand lube a switch any faster than I can. Akko supplied me with the stock and factory lubed versions of the jelly white, lavender purple, and matcha green, and if you want to get some of these yourself, you can use the links in the description down below and use coupon code UNICORNREVIEWS to get 10% off on the Akko website. We'll start with the jelly white, a 35 gram linear, which activates at 1.9 millimeters and bottoms out around 45 grams. It uses a 22 millimeter spring, which makes assembly a little tricky. This switch feels very smooth stock with a little audible scratching, but it has a high-pitched ping to the spring on the return stroke. Lubing the switch manually resulted in a marginally smoother operation. The bottom out feels a little sticky now though, whereas the top out sounds muffled and lower in pitch. I made sure to check my own lubing thoroughly each time, so they all felt and sounded incredibly similar. The Akko hand-lubed version sits somewhere in between stock and the ones I lubed myself. Opening up these factory lubed switches shows a light greasing on the sliders in the bottom housing, but Akko doesn't seem to cover the spring seats as much as I do, which results in a crisper but pingier feel and sound. Next up is the Matcha Green. It's a slightly heavier linear and it needs about 50 grams of pressure to activate at the same 1.9 millimeters as the jelly whites. This one bottoms out at 63 grams. The spring is only 15 millimeters long, so your stem won't wobble as much when you're trying to reassemble the housing. These greens have quite some scratchy noise to them. They also ping a little on top out. Lubing these myself got rid of all the unpleasant sounds, but they do feel a little bit slower. While the switch became smoother, it also feels pretty dead now. It's an improvement, but perhaps I used a little bit too much lube on these when lubing them myself. Like with the jelly white, Akko lubes these a little bit less than I do, retaining a more raw feel at the expense of scratchiness and a little bit of ping on top out. And finally, I have the Lavender Purple. This is a tactile switch. It actuates at 1.9 millimeters, 36 grams, and bottoms out at 50 grams using an 18 millimeter spring. These are a little bit stiff at the top, which is why I personally prefer the Ocean Blue, but there's no factory lubed version of that one. The purple feels a little more scratchy than the white because of its tactileness, but it also pings on the downstroke. Lubing it manually didn't do much to smooth it out more, but it again made the sound deeper and removed the pinginess. Once more, the Akko hand lubing takes care of the bottom housing sliders but ignores the spring pocket in the stem. While very smooth and tactile, there is still some pinging on the downstroke. So overall, the ones that I lubed myself are slightly smoother at the cost of being perhaps a bit dead and sticky. The big improvement here is definitely in the sound department, where the manually slightly overlubed switches are just void of any sort of pinginess. Akko's hand-lubed switches sit somewhere in between the ones that I perhaps overlubed and the stock switches. Akko seems to focus more on getting the feel right and making them very smooth without any sort of deadness or stickiness to them, at the cost of keeping some of that pinginess in the spring. The total picture is perhaps a little bit more complicated though than just preferring feel over sound, whereas I prefer sound over feel. Akko is definitely looking into the financial aspect and the time needed to lube a switch when only lubing the bottom housing against lubing the bottom housing, the spring and the stem. It has to be said though that all of these switches feel and sound incredibly similar, which is why my girlfriend and I did some blind testing to actually try out the sound and the feel of each and every spring that we tested. You can see the graph on your screen right now. So as you can see, it's actually a lot closer. I have to exaggerate a lot while talking about them just to give you guys an idea of what it's like. And so while I personally think the switches that I manually lubed are ever so slightly better, I think you have to keep in mind the cost in money versus the cost in my time. And I think paying 10 euros extra for an entire keyboard full of switches is definitely worth it. Maybe there is still some pinginess to them, but you probably won't hear them with all the rattling going on from mashing all your keys. When it comes to smoothness, they're probably on par or better than what I can do. And in the sound department, they're 90% of the way there. So definitely I would buy a hand-lubed Akko switch if I were going with an Akko switch for my next custom keyboard. I think Akko is really making the hobby and the more high-end part of the hobby more accessible, easily accessible and affordable for everyone. And that's really something I'm going to give them a massive thumbs up for. Now, one thing I was very worried about but haven't talked about yet is the consistency with the factory hand-lubed switches. Obviously, the people who have to hand-lube these in a factory have to do thousands a day just to make it financially viable. Just go very fast. However, I have to say that they were all very consistent. They are perhaps a bit more heavily lubed on the sliders and not as much on the other bits, but very consistent lubing straight out of the factory. So I'm going to finish this video off with saying a big thank you to Akko for sending me these. Also guys, make sure to use the links in the description below and use coupon code UNICORNREVIEWS to get 10% off of these switches, making them an even better value proposition. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Do the whole YouTube like, share, subscribe, bell icon thing, and I'll see you all in the next one. Cheers!